Hello and welcome to the after party. We are so happy that you're here for this very exciting week. Oh my God, are we excited about this week's episode? It is the one y'all have been begging for, waiting for, asking for, the 911 Lone Star special. So we're going to speed through this intro and get you to the conversation with Max Gow and JJ B-Way Watch, who are on standby with us in the studio. If you're watching on TikTok, make sure to head over now so you don't miss them in a few minutes when we get going. But if you're new here and you don't know us, hello, my name is Producer Liz. I'm Producer Liz everywhere on the internet. And I talk about PR and pop culture. And as of late, I cry over Taylor Swift tickets because I'm seeing Taylor 2 weeks from today. Hello. And the new Harry Styles album, Harry's House, which we're going to hear more about that at the end of the show after the 911 segment, because boy, do I have thoughts on the drama this week. And Marissa's here. Marissa's going to introduce herself, and we're all going to be very kind to Marissa, whose voice is going a little bit this evening. So Marissa, how are you doing? Tell the people who you are.
Hi, I'm Marissa. I'm at Miss Abobissa everywhere on the internet, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See, I'm very allergic right now.
Drinking game out of it, yes.
I'm very allergic right now, but I talk about theater and wigs and basically anything that's streaming on Disney Plus on the internet. Other than that, I've been committed to Disney Plus this week, going hard into Star Wars and catching up on the prequels because I've never watched them before, and now I have.
How was Return of the Sith? Are you like, where are we checking in post Return of the Sith?
Oh, I'm good.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, I'm fine.
You're just vibing.
Listen,
we're gonna unpack that.
I've been alive the whole time those movies have been out. Like, I knew beat for beat what was gonna happen. I just hadn't watched like the full 2.5 hours all the way through. So like, I was fine. There was like full scenes that I had already seen. So
well, I watched that movie feeling the exact same way, and I was a mess by the end of it. So we will unpack that at a later time. The fact that you watched Return of the Sith, no fear, no chaotic vibes. And speaking of chaotic vibes, Alexis Blake Reads Comics is here.
Why, thank you, Elizabeth.
How are you this week?
I'm good. I'm Alexis Blake Reads Comics, and I talk about comics and cats on the internet. And I've recently become obsessed with the 911s, which is the only media I have consumed this week. So excited to be able to talk about it today.
And speaking of only consuming 911 Lone Star, it is our favorite and only resident Jane Austen expert 911 expert crossover host, Sly. That might be the best transition I've ever done on this show. I just want to say that now.
Incredible. Hi, I'm Sly at SlyCloneMC. I'm a deaf queer Jane Austen fan, and we're here, we're queer, and we're throwing the after party. Let's get into it.
Yes, and this is a big week for all of us. Like we said, we have some special guests, so welcome to everyone joining us for the first time on the show. We're so excited to see some new faces, see some familiar faces, and we have some faces behind the scenes that y'all usually see in the comments, so we're excited to kind of do a from the comments to the screen crossover. Y'all know we love taking the audience members and making you part of the show. That's how Sly got here in the first place, as Alexis very rightfully called out before the show started. That's how JJ got here tonight. And who knows, maybe some of you will have expertise to provide later episodes as well. But it's everyone's favorite segment up first, I think. Do we want to go right? Are we ready to go right into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
We're going fast and furious tonight, folks. It is the rants segment of the show. So if you've never watched before, brace yourselves because you're in for a little bit of chaos. The way it works, we've each prepared a rant from everything that we've watched and consumed in pop culture. And this week specifically, we're talking just about 911 Lone Star. So everyone on screen has 2 minutes to give you their rant, but we only can talk in 30-second intervals. So I'll kick things off, and then after 30 seconds, Marissa will cut me off, and then Sly will cut Marissa off, and then Alexis will cut Sly off, and we'll go until 8 minutes is up. So tonight, I am sharing my hottest take I have ever given on this show that constantly gets me grilled by all of you, and I know tonight's going to be no exception. I will be making the case for watching 911 in 15-minute random intervals with no context. And Marissa, what are you ranting about this evening?
Well, I'm going to be ranting about the fact that I don't watch 911, and I probably never will.
When we say we represent every member of the 911 community on the screen in terms of watchability and context, we're every end of the scale. Sly, what are you ranting about this evening?
I am giving my hot take on why the machete order, as I've dubbed it, is the best order to consume the 911 universe in.
Beautiful. And Alexis.
I am giving my hot take on how the order I watch 911 in is the best order to watch 911 in.
So you're going to leave this rant segment with a preferred way of watching the show. You'll have to let us know in the comments what way you are going to approach the show from. Perhaps you'll be on Team Marissa with you're not watching the show, but you're here for the vibes. Perhaps you'll be Team Sly, which is there's only one way. It's the machete way. Or maybe you'll be somewhere in between. But either way, brace yourselves. Everyone take a deep breath. And let's get the rants segment started. Okay. Mine provides a bit of context for those of you that are new, which is that sometimes I turn on my cable television and 911 or 911 Lone Star just happens to be on. So as a good friend to Sly specifically, I turn it on because I want to know what's going on. And I've been known to like Rob Lowe's work, which I know apparently is not a take you're allowed to have in the 911 Lone Star fandom all the time. But regardless of that, I turn it on and I just watch whatever point it's at with no context. And honestly, it is the best, most chaotic way of watching the show. And I highly recommend it to everyone.
I have never watched 911. I've never watched 911 Lone Star. I probably won't ever watch either of them. My time in procedurals has ended. My time in most network television has ended. I've moved on from that era of my life. That's just my personality now. But I would like to tell you what I know about 911. I know that Buck and Eddie and Christopher exist on 911, and apparently there's someone named Taylor. I can't tell if that's a woman or not. I think that's on 911.
Okay, so when we're talking about how to consume the universe of 911, there's two shows here, and a lot of people have different opinions on how to start this. But what you have to go into this knowing is that season 1 of 911, what I'll call OG, is a very different show. So how I propose to watch is a machete order, where you start with Lone Star season 1, and you're gonna watch through. I'm gonna continue this in my next segment.
Some context, I am not a big network television fan. I'm not a big emergency drama fan. So I was not going to get through this show even out of like sheer love for my husband, unless I had like something that was motivating me to get through the show. And I think there are a lot of people out there like me. So if you are out there and you are like me, I think the best thing to do is to go on TikTok and find all of the edits, right? Just start with everybody's edits and go through and pick out.
There are the times when it was worth it to not have any context about 911. First would be when Rob Lowe stared at a clown for a very long time. And I had no idea why or what the significance was. I thought it was just maybe an edgy cutaway. I had no backstory to base a stare off of. But I did enjoy the acting of that moment. So I was able to pick up the cue that perhaps there was more at stake. I chose not to believe that and just to feel in that moment that his only choice was to stare at a clown.
Okay, I also know that TK Strand and Carlos are on 911 Lone Star, and also Owen Strand, I think, Oliver, I don't really know, is Rob Lowe, I think, and we don't like him. And that's about the extent of all of my knowledge about 911 and 911 Lone Star. What I can talk about is our flag queen's death, and I would love to have this opportunity to do that. I can't believe I keep coughing. I love our flag queen's death. It still hasn't been renewed for season 2, and boy, oh boy, do I have
All right,
feelings.
so you start with Lone Star season 1. You watch all the way up until season 2, episode 2, and here's where you take a step back, okay? Then you go to OG, and you're gonna watch season 1 through 4, up until season 4, episode 5. That's gonna kick you off right into the crossover. Sets you up perfectly. You go back to Lone Star, you watch season 2, episode 3 to current, and then you go back to OG and you're gonna watch season 4, episode 4.
Okay, so then you pick your characters, right? You pick your characters and you pick your moments, right? So for example, you may see a child floating on a fire truck in the middle of the ocean, and you may be like, that is my character and that is my moment. Or you may see somebody like digging through the mud screaming with their bare hands. And you may be like, that guy clearly looks like he's best friends with someone. I want to follow that guy in that moment. And then what you do is you call a friend. And you
then
say,
there was the time that Rob Lowe hugged someone that was on the squad. And I was like, this seems like a very weird boss to like person on team relationship to have. And then I found out it was his son, which was very much not a reveal. But to me, it was the biggest, most dramatic television reveal I've ever seen in my life. I had no idea why these two were hugging. And then I found out they are father and son. And then the next time, in the same episode where the clown stare happened, he called his son to tell him that he loved him. And I thought that was like nice. And I wish I had had more context around that phone call.
My big problem with the fact that we don't have an Our Flag Means Death Season 2 announcement is that Lucasfilm just confirmed at Star Wars Celebration that the next Star Wars film is going to be directed by Taika Waititi. If you would remember from any of my other Our Flag Means Death fans, Taika Waititi is a season regular on Our Flag Means Death. He is pivotal to this show. And this Star Wars movie is apparently coming out at the end of next year. I don't see where he's going to film another season of Our Flag Means Death while he has to make a Star Wars movie, which I'm very excited for.
So the reason this is the best order to watch in is you get the feeling of later seasons of 911 with starting out with Lone Star Season 1. It's very much the same vibe. And then you get to go back in time to the Connie Britton show and enjoy that without hating her yet. And then you can continue through the series. And that's just like the best way to get the vibes to set yourself up to enjoy this universe as a whole.
Alexis, it's your turn to rant.
I froze. Okay. No. I couldn't see what was going on.
It's okay.
So then you call a friend and you ask for help and you watch those arcs first because your attachment to those characters is going to pull you through the rest of the show, right? Because then you're going to go back to the Connie Britton show and you're going to be like, where the hell is Eddie and what did I sign on for? But you know that you have hope.
But
that
the first episode I ever watched of 911 Lone Star was the ice storm, apparently, where someone...
It was season 3, episode 3, halfway through.
Thank you, Sly. I really appreciate that genuinely because apparently it was a big deal and I was just casually on my couch eating some sour cream and onion chips and someone's going into labor. There's a hostage situation. Someone drank diesel out of a trailer, whatever, and he had beef with the captain and there was so much going on and I just loved the vibes of the chaos. It was beautiful.
I think this is my last time ranting. This is my last 30 seconds, I think. So I'm going to say that I love Our Flag Means Death and it's going to be my Dune. It's going to be my 911. I think Alexis's thing is probably cats that nobody else really talks about on this show, where Liz is just like, everyone needs to watch Dune, but we don't. I'm like, everyone needs to watch Our Flag Means Death, and they don't. It's on HBO Max, and I think Crave internationally. Highly recommend.
All right, so now I'm just going to debunk everybody else's. So Liz is just thriving on chaos, and that's the only reason why it works for her. If you don't thrive on chaos, it's not going to work for you. Alexis only got through this by sheer force of will and putting up with me yelling about this thing. But I will say, I had another friend who started watching 911 because I yell about it so much, and she started season 1, and she texted me, "Have I met Eddie yet?" And she hadn't.
Okay, so there are a lot of ways to watch 911. I would say all of them are equal, but that would be a lie. But the important thing is that you watch it in the way that's best for you, because that means you're watching it. And if you're like me and you need something to hold on to, I would start with the edits and pick your moments, and then that will get you through the show. The flaw that I made was I only picked edits for one show. So then I had to crawl my way through Lone Star by my fingernails, which I do not recommend.
What a segment. Wow, we really went in. And we got a little Our Flag Means Death moment in there. So for those of you that were counting the minutes until that happened, it was very early on this episode.
Instead of an Alpine rant banner, we now just need an
Our Flag Means Death
Our Flag
banner.
Means Death banner.
We do. Well, listen, Marissa, it's okay. You're off the
little
clock,
pirate
perhaps.
ship on the bottom.
Sly, we, as our designated and fierce leader into the world of 911 Lone Star, we are officially handing the reins to you to open the doors on this explosive WTF moment of the week, year, century conversation around 911 and 911 Lone Star. So the show is yours, my friend.
All right, for everybody watching on TikTok, please head over to YouTube or Twitch to come hang out with us. It's going to be a great time. Some conversation points to look forward to. We're going to be talking about shoes. We're going to be talking about the interactions between fandom and the press. We're going to be talking about the writing styles of network dramas and how it's changing, all that good stuff. Come on over and join us for this 911 hostile takeover. Liz and Marissa, you're getting out of here. We're kicking you off.
Oh
No
no.
longer welcome.
We're
I'm
no
so
longer
sorry.
welcome.
This is officially turned into the 911 the 911 show. So of course I cannot host a show all about 911 without my better half of Thirsty Thursdays, my fearless co-host, and that is the one and only JJ Watch. JJ, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? All that good jazz.
Hi, I'm JJ Watch, or just JJ for those who have now met me. You can find me on Twitter and TikTok talking about toxic masculinity, queer representation, and storytelling, because I am just a guy who watches way too much television and is a little too much obsessed with it. And yeah, that's what I do, breaking those moments down and, sending them on their way.
And where can people find you?
Yes, JJ at JJ Watch on Twitter and on TikTok.
Very fun. And of course, we have a very special guest. If you've been watching the show for any amount of time, you've seen multiple conversations surrounding his work. And of course, we welcome the one and only Max Gao. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Who are you? What do you do? Where can people find you? All that good jazz.
So I'm Max. You can find me at Max J Gao on Twitter or Max_Gao on Instagram. I am a student, but I'm also a freelance entertainment journalist, and one of the shows I cover happens to be 911, which is why I'm here today.
All right, let's kick off this wonderful discussion. Can we get the GIF?
Oh.
I'm waiting on the producer. There we go.
Yes, incredible.
Incredible. All right. Kicking off this discussion, we're just going to talk about how the finales held up. How do we think they compare to the season as a whole? How do we think they compare to past finales? All that good stuff. I don't actually know your thoughts on this, JJ, so I'm going to kick it to you first. How did we feel with the endings of the season?
I think that the finales of both Lone Star and OG 911 were very, very calm, very, very chill, very, very, we're gonna wrap up some loose ends and we're gonna, clean slate. We're gonna finish everything up and, just set everyone on their way for the hiatus, instead of the normal 911 accoutrement for season finale, which is, let us give you the most high stakes, stressful situation and then kind of resolve it and then drop a truth bomb at you right before the cutoff. So I'm thinking, like, when they announced that, spoiler alerts, that Maddie was pregnant at the end of season 3, and then it was like end camera, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, you're just gonna leave us there? Yep, you're just gonna leave us there. Instead, it was all very nicely tied up in a nice little bow for both Lone Star and OG. And, in a lot of ways, I liked that. I liked to not be stressed for 6 months until I get to watch the show again.
That's pretty much where I'm at. Max, how are you feeling it? As I know you had a very busy weekend while these shows were wrapping up.
Yes, I was very, very busy. I was in Puerto Rico for the weekend because I was covering another Fox show called Fantasy Island, which doesn't air until this fall. So it'll be part of the lineup with the 911s when they inevitably come back at some point. But anyway, I think I'm just like JJ. I was pleasantly surprised that both finales ended on a pretty high note, on a pretty positive note. I mean, it's no secret that for 911, at least, when I talked to the new showrunner Kristen Rydell about kind of the spring premiere and everything that had happened that season thus far, she was very open and said that there were scheduling changes. There were all these kinds of different things that were happening behind the scenes that prevented them from really executing the vision for the season that they wanted or that they had. So it honestly, season 5A felt like a completely different show. It might have been better for some people, might have been worse, but I thought that season 5B was definitely a return to form. Like we said, the stakes didn't feel as high as probably like the bomb suspect in season 2, the train derailment in season 3, and then the aftermath of Eddie's shooting in season 4. So I do think that the show, it felt like hitting the reset button on every single character, kind of like what JJ said. There's any number of storylines that can be executed next season. So I think that was definitely a wise move on the writer's part. Lone Star, I think this was the best season of them all. I'll be honest with you, because the first 2 seasons did a great job of setting up the world, but this season was really great for expanding it, deepening it, and continuing to explore the dynamics outside of the usual ones. I mean, I've been very, very open about which dynamics I would have liked to see more than others. Let's put it that way.
So have we.
Yeah. And
I think we share. I think we all are in agreement of the dynamics that are very successful and hit on an emotional level.
Yeah, it still felt like a reset, though. I think the finale, because the characters whose narratives were really centered in that finale, they still felt like they were overcoming personal demons. I don't know if everyone here has seen the finale, so I won't spoil it.
We're doing full spoilers. Feel free to dive in. Any thoughts?
I mean, Owen with 9/11, TK with the proposal, Judd with saving people after an explosion. It just felt like they were closing that chapter, opening a new one for the next season, which I felt was going to be very, very interesting. But it remains to be seen if this will continue, if they're going to be able to continue to build on whatever they have created this season, for sure.
For sure. And Alexis, this is your first time experiencing the live event that is 911.
Yeah.
So how do you feel as somebody who just recently went through all of the show up until now to catch the finales?
Watching the OG finale was incredibly stressful for me because I anticipated that it would be like all of the other OG finales that I had binged like the 3 weeks before. I thought it was, I agree with what everybody said, right? I thought it was great to kind of wrap up everyone's stories that way. But I did have this kernel of anxiety. Like, do they know where they're going next? Why is this so out of form for them? So I think it was both, anxiety provoking and a relief. I'm interested to see what they do next. And I watched the Lone Star finale last night. So it's still very fresh, I'm still dealing with it. I had a couple issues with the finale overall. I didn't feel like it necessarily had the room to tell the amount of story that it wanted to tell. And so to me, that meant that some of Judd's story got lost to Owen's story, and some of Owen's story got lost to Judd's story. And a little bit of TK and Carlos's stuff got lost. I would have liked to see the Will stuff maybe sprinkled throughout the season rather than something that just showed up in the finale. I think especially with Gwen's death, there were some opportunities there to have parts of that conversation earlier. But overall, I thought it was a good finale, and I'm pro no more train derailments. So that was all great.
Yeah, speaking of the Will conversation in Lone Star, we have a lot of stories that we seem to have common themes being reused from OG in Lone Star this season. What do we think about the stories they chose to reuse, and which ones hit for you and which ones didn't? Anybody have any starting thoughts?
I mean, I can start.
Go for it.
Go.
I mean, yes, they exist in the same universe, but I still think, as someone who has watched both shows all the way through, they still feel like two very fundamentally different shows that can stand on their own. And I think that was part of the goal of Tim Minear when he created Lone Star. He still wanted to create something that felt like it had the DNA of the original, but still felt fresh, still felt different. And I mean, look, after 8 combined seasons of television between the original and Lone Star, you're going to have some sort of overlap between the emergencies, the storylines. I mean, these characters are incredibly human. I think that's why people love them so much. So the fact that people are noticing that there are these common threads, more or less, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it shows, one, that they're incredibly invested, but two, it just shows that the things that happen to these characters aren't always outlandish. They aren't always just exceptional and everything like that. There is something that makes them human. And I do think the writers try to avoid carbon copies of the emergencies and the storylines. I think that is true. Like they still want to give them their own arc, and they're incredibly protective of that, from what I've understood from the conversation with the showrunners and everything like that. But I do think that the best procedurals, I mean, I think you guys kind of talked about it before. So someone else was talking about procedurals earlier. The best ones, I think, that I've always watched, like Bones, Grey's Anatomy, they're always character driven. I mean, theoretically, the cases and everything that happens should reveal something new or something existing about the first responders. And that's how they continue to evolve. Because after so much time, there's only so many stories you can tell theoretically. Personal stories. But then if you have different emergencies, then you might have different opportunities to expand that and to deepen whatever understanding we have of these characters.
For sure. I know one thing that JJ and I have talked about at length on our show is the idea of how characters were set up in the universe, and how it was, it sometimes feels like some characters are there to appease fans of other characters, and how that impacts our perception of their stories. JJ, do you want to expand on that?
I just think, I think there are it's very easy to jump to conclusions with two shows in one universe, especially when we're considering like other network shows that exist within the same universe. Like you have the Chicago universes, which are all very interconnected, and then Grey's Anatomy and Station 19, which like I feel like last season, not this current season, but the season before, there was a crossover every episode. Like every episode was a crossover event. So I just remember when Lone Star happened for the first time, and I saw Carlos and TK, and it was right after Buck and Eddie had like a huge moment, and I was like, what is happening here? And it was a very small conclusion to jump. There was a jump to conclusions, but it was a small jump. And I think that is very much coloring how people view how those stories progressed, which isn't, because I don't believe I was the only person to make that jump to conclusion. I feel it was a very popular interpretation, especially at the beginning. And I do think it's nice that they started to make more changes in the dynamic and, create individual characters and individual storylines for the both of them. But it becomes very interesting when there are strong connections about both thematically between those two groups of characters, and like what does that mean for us as audience members who are sitting there and watching both shows back to back live. Because like all of a sudden you dust off OG and then you watch 911 Lone Star right after, and you're just jumping back to what happened in OG, like when they create those parallels. And it's like, how much do I invest in this? How much do I not invest in these parallels? And it can be kind of confusing.
Yeah, that's something I really noticed this season. Since it was the first season, I was actively watching live. That quick jump when, you get roll credits on OG and immediately jump into Lone Star, thinking about how these shows are very separate and, crafted in very different ways. But what is the viewer experience for so much of the fan base who do consume both of these shows? Like that emotional, experience over the course of the 2 hours that you're watching has changed my perspective on this season, I think, compared to previous seasons where I watched them more independently. But Alexis, you've consumed both of these shows in very quick succession, so you're seeing all of these beats. Which stories really stood out to you that you saw kind of reused and reformatted for the show?
What was so interesting to me is I think by being a show that was going to like create a spinoff that was set up very similarly to the original and kind of placed somewhere else with different characters, really for me put them in a unique position to decide what worked and what didn't, and what they wanted to change and what they wanted to keep. And some of those choices were interesting to me, like especially to go from such an ensemble show to Lone Star, which I think especially in season 1 was more of an Owen Strand-centric show. That was a fascinating move for me. I was a little worried in season 1 of Lone Star because the call center didn't seem to really have any of its own footing at all. And that was something that I thought was so unique and engaging about 911, is that by situating this call center as its own world, I not only got their stories, but I got told the story of each case in kind of this like stack, right? Where I got a piece of it from each different emergency unit. That was part of the show that I really liked. And although Lone Star has improved on that, it definitely wasn't there in his first season, right? But outside of that, I mean, anybody that watches both shows is going to compare and contrast them, right? So like JJ and I were having a conversation the other night about like differences in captain leadership and like what that should tell us about each show. I think that's really interesting. And sometimes I have to wonder how intentional they are with parallels and how much of it is an accident and if it should be. For me, as someone who just finished OG like 2 weeks ago, to then watch Lone Star and have a finale with 2 men and a Will and a first name, it was almost impossible not to parallel that to a moment in OG with 2 men and a Will and a first name, right? And at a certain point, I have to wonder how intentional that parallel was, or if it was an accident, and if it was an accident, why? But overall, I think the great thing about having 2 strong shows in the same universe is that we get to have those types of conversations.
Absolutely. Speaking of things that occur in both shows that have us asking questions, I got a lovely text from Alexis the other day that was like, why is TK Strand wearing shoes to bed? Which is a very valid question. And it brings me back to an old tweet of yours, Max, where you were talking about Chimney wearing shoes in the house, which is a very, good point to bring up. But now every time I watch this show, I'm thinking about shoes, and it's your two's fault.
My fault?
Yeah.
Okay. This is something that, I thought we were going to discuss this maybe later in the show when we're talking about like representation and then the characters on the show. But I think we can bring it forward now. It's interesting because when you have these characters that represent so many different walks of life, so many different communities, and that kind of representation is so important. That's part of the appeal of the show. But with that comes the responsibility of being able to properly represent those communities. So I've had great conversations with actors about kind of how they have been working to honor the background or the culture of their characters, or really just their own culture on screen. And it's something that I've just kind of gradually come to notice even more now that I've been working in the business for a couple of years. And especially when we're talking about Asian culture, for example, with Chimney and Albert in the house. Yes, Maddie was also in the house, but they didn't take off their shoes in the house. And I think, correct me if there's any Koreans who are watching this, please feel free to reach out and let me know if I'm wrong about this. But I think generally in Asian cultures, especially my own culture, you don't wear your outside shoes inside the house. You take off your shoes at the door, you wear slippers, but you certainly don't wear those shoes to bed, let alone around your house. So those little details tell me that the people behind the scenes, unfortunately, are not Asian. Those are things that people would have picked up on, or people should have advocated for. Like, yes, the actors could have spoken up, but at a certain point, it's not up to them sometimes. And those things are things that I would hope that they would improve in future seasons. I'm not holding my breath. It's not like a cardinal sin if they wear shoes inside the house, even though sometimes it feels like it does culturally. But just the fact that I was able to notice those little nuances, I do think that Asians continue to be underrepresented behind the camera, let alone in front of the camera. So just the conversation about the shoes, I was not expecting that part, but it's something that comes up, and I do think about it sometimes now as well.
Yeah, it's just like I saw that tweet and then I was thinking about it every time I saw them on screen. I'm like, wow, it's kind of weird that they're wearing shoes in the house. And then I get the text about TK wearing shoes to bed, which, like, I get he's about to be in a fire, but like we could dismiss that. And then I think JJ brought up the talking about, like, they're in LA. Like, why does Buck not have like slides from Peru or something? I have strong feelings about the shoe choices on the show.
Why are they always wearing thermal Henleys and sweaters, and they're in layers, and they're wearing like thick $200, like $300 jeans? What is going on here? Very, very confused. Very
Gwen
confused.
loves a sweater. She stays in Austin, Texas in a whole lot of sweaters. I was like, wow, bestie. That's some dedication to the vibe.
I still don't know how Buck can afford that apartment on a firefighter salary. I mean, come on. That loft apartment, that's too nice. They give him too much credit.
You know, Carlos and TK's, like, Carlos is a police officer with the down payment to buy that condo. Like,
I mean, we need to learn about their investment habits. Seriously, like, get us to do some of that, because I can't even believe some of the things. I mean, yes, you buy into it because it's the story, but I was like, oh my goodness, like, really? Okay.
For sure. Well, we're talking about Buck's apartment. This is going to be a rough transition. Just go with me. We had a lot of conversations this season about Buck's apartment and Taylor and what that means for them as characters. And I've had strong feelings about Taylor Kelly for a very long time. I've been very open about that. I loved Taylor until 5A, and I feel like they lost the essence of her character, and we started to get it back at the end of 5B. And one of my favorite moments with Taylor is her standing her ground and sticking to her guns and running the Jonah story, which a lot of people disagree with me on. But it sparked a really interesting conversation in what do we consider the portrayal of journalism in our media and how we interact with how it's portrayed and the more realities of what that means. And there was lots of conversations around what off the record actually means. And so since we have somebody who's currently doing that work, I thought it was the perfect time to dive into this conversation that seems to be happening around what does journalistic integrity really mean? What does off the record really mean? And how is that represented on screen?
Well, that's a great question. I'll be honest. Okay, so I don't ever want to kind of like downplay what I do or what my colleagues do. I mean, I have so much respect for the people who work in entertainment journalism. It's part of the reason why I wanted to do it in the first place. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that we're writing about television, the business of television, for a living or just on the side as a job. And we are not the people who are holding politicians accountable. We're not the people who are reporting about natural disasters and people who like work in metro journalism, like Taylor Kelly. Like those people are really the lifeblood of this industry. So I can't really speak to like metro journalism in that way, but I will say that it is very interesting to see the conversations that have been happening about that, because yes, she agreed not to run the story, and I can see both sides of it. So I can see why she would want to get ahead of the story and to be the one to break it, because those things are in the DNA of the journalist. Like a lot of the time people want to be the first or one of the first to break a story, and that's totally fine. That's really, really in line with her character. And then you have the other side of it where she did agree to keep it off the record. And in a way, she cost her romantic relationship with Buck as a result. But she made her choice. So I do think it opens up a really interesting conversation about what that means, especially in today's world, where things are so connected and you have social media being this big force that is used in journalism really to break a story and to spread news. And I just think that maybe at a certain point, it's more of a subjective thing, I think. Like, there are a lot of people who will have strong opinions about her, who have had strong opinions about her. I've read some of them for sure. And I'm definitely not saying she's in the right about anything that she has done, but she made her choice, and you have to be able to empathize with both sides of it. You don't have to understand, but you have to understand where they're coming from. And I think the writers stayed true to who we thought she was. When she was first introduced in season 2 and then reappeared in season 4, because I was a little bit kind of skeptical about how she had changed, if she had changed at all. But I do think that in the long run, the writers did have a vision for Taylor, and they knew who she was, and they wrote to who that person was in their minds. So it's really just a long-winded way of saying that it's a subjective thing. It's definitely very interesting to see what TV writers think journalists do and vice versa. And it's definitely, I mean, there's a lot of overlap because a lot of TV journalists do go into TV writing, so people do have the experience, but like, we just cover television. We're not covering metro journalism, as I said. So, I mean, I don't know. It's up to anyone to decide. There is no right or wrong answer, I don't think.
I will say, as soon as she made that promise, every fiber of my being was like, break that promise, Taylor, break it, release the story.
Yeah.
It was such a nice moment.
It was interesting to me because I was having a conversation with somebody that had just watched or was watching the show through the other day, and it was just interesting to me to see why people thought that she did it. Because I've had a lot of people tell me, especially in regards to like Dosed, right? And what she does with Bobby's story there, that like it was bad for her to want to tell it. But if you think about it from Taylor's point of view, right, she is trying to share something that she thinks is important to the public. And I would argue that like knowing there's a serial killer on the loose who was hired by the fire department, or knowing that the firefighters eat brownies donated by the public willy-nilly and can get high off of them, I would argue that those are both important stories for the public to have. And it's been interesting to me that that piece of the conversation has been lost with her a little bit. And I have to wonder how much it would have been lost if Taylor was a male journalist on the show. I think we see this kind of pattern in a lot of different shows with female journalists where their integrity is called into question. So I think that's an interesting layer of nuance that I would like to see in the conversation about her ethics more.
Absolutely. And it's when we're looking at, you know, the contents of that story, right? She did have a conversation that was off the record, but if you look at what they're saying she's actually reporting on, it's all common information. She just had it prepared beforehand. And so I think the way they balanced that was really interesting. But that does kind of lead us into how we as fans are interacting with the members of the press who are talking about and reporting on the shows we are consuming and loving and enjoying. And Max, you found yourself in the middle of some fandom drama a couple times. One of my favorite moments was you were one of the first people that I've seen who was very much strongly in support of Lone Star is more interesting when it's not the Owen Strand show. And around that time, you were doing interviews with Ronan, and that turned into a Twitter happening, which I thought was a brilliant moment if you're looking at it from a social media perspective of you're doing your job, he's doing his job, sparking up conversation. But I can understand it's not pleasant to be on the backlash side of that. So what was that situation like from your perspective?
Geez. Okay, I mean, where do I even start? I mean, okay, so I did showrunner interviews before the spring premiere of 911. So it was 5/11 for 911, 3/11 for Lone Star. And I had two very great conversations, very constructive conversations with Kristen Rydell, who oversees 911 with Tim Minear, but Tim oversees both shows. So he kind of passes things off. So he has showrunners on both shows now. So I talked to Kristen about the original, but I ended up talking to Tim for Lone Star. That's just how it ended up happening. And I got some great quotes. I had more than enough to write a preview piece, which I did. And considering this was the first time that I had gotten a chance to talk to Kristen since she kind of became the new co-showrunner, and she's really written some of the most defining episodes of the franchise, I posed the question. I asked her about it, and I wasn't the only one. If you ended up looking at some of the other interviews that she did, especially with my fellow 911 beat reporter, Jennifer Moss at Variety, she wrote a great piece about
also
the 911
incredible.
wrote an incredible feature, talked to Angela Bassett, Rob Lowe, talked to people at Fox, all these incredible people, even the showrunners as well. She posed the question as well. So it wasn't just me who was asking it, but basically the topic of Buck and Eddie's relationship came up. And I felt it was a natural transition to ask about how she views that dynamic. And then I pushed her a little bit further, and then I kind of went and I was like, okay, so what do you have to say about all of these specific scenes that might point to one thing if you think it's purely platonic? And I mean, it was a constructive conversation. I understood where she was coming from. I ended up writing, I think I did the interviews on a Thursday, wrote the article on a Friday, sent it off to my editor, went out for dinner, didn't think anything of it.
And then Twitter exploded.
And then it went up. My editor, she was just like, well, I want to get it up before the weekend. So I was like, okay, like, just let me know when it's up. And she ended up, fun fact, she ended up reaching out back to, like, she emailed me and she was like, what do you think about these headlines? And I was like, okay, we got to be very, very careful about this because the relationship here is very, very special. I never want to downplay it. And I certainly think of it as one way. People think about it the other way. So I was like, okay, I want to be sensitive here. I don't want to purely say it's platonic, never happening, anything, like point blank, that was it. Mm-hmm. So the headline that you see on that article on TV Guide was the one that I had proposed, the one that I had effectively chosen out of a different options. So I sent out the article. It seemed like it was fine, and then, as you said, Twitter exploded. It was interesting because I realized that in hindsight, a lot of the anger was a little bit misdirected, and that wasn't just me saying that. It was more so like I had some very, very lovely people who reached out to me personally and said, like, listen, like, I know I was wrong, like I'm sorry for whatever I said, and I definitely appreciated that. And I think it has to do with the fact that the fans don't feel like they have a direct connection to the showrunners, the writers, whatever it might be, and they shouldn't to begin with. I mean, these people are doing their jobs. They are writing what they think the story should be. And that's the end of it. Like, yes, the fandom is the one that keeps the show going, keeps it alive, keeps it in the cultural conversation. But at a certain point, you can't fault someone for doing their job. Like, you can have opinions, absolutely, but there still has to be some sort of respect there. And I mean, it's no secret that Tim has deactivated his Twitter. He's left the site completely. Rashad, his co-showrunner on Lone Star, never had social media, I think, to begin with. Kristen isn't that active on Twitter anyway. And yet people still try to throw things at them and they try to say things because in a way they do feel a little bit helpless, I would think, because they might want the story to go in one way and they are scared that it's not being recognized in the way that they should be. And I mean, that's totally fine. That's totally reasonable. But I mean, it was so bad to the point where I took it overnight. I was like, okay, fine. Like, this is just what was going to happen. Then people started spreading rumors. Basically saying that because I had written this article, which, by the way, was not an opinion piece, it was simply stating what I had been given by the showrunners, and then I provided some evidence in the contrary to make sure it was a balanced piece. Some people who said that there were cast members on the original that for some reason had unfollowed me because of what I had written. I think it's kind of hard for someone to unfollow you when they never followed you to begin with. I mean, that was when I kind of reached the break point. I was like, okay, listen, I'm going to lock the account, protect my peace. I posted a thread. I think it's still up at this point, kind of explaining my side of the story. And basically I was like, listen, like, there's a fundamental difference between writing about a show and writing for a show. We as journalists have no creative control whatsoever about what is going to happen on your favorite show. We just report on it. And we can't change what a showrunner says as much as we might disagree with it. I think that was the biggest sticking point for me, because these people just didn't understand that there was that difference. And they essentially thought that I was like the writer of the show saying like, it's never going to happen. I mean, anything can happen on the show. I mean, people are still holding out hope that something's going to happen. And I totally empathize with that. And I would love to see it happen, but it's not my place to say anything about that anyway. It is what it is. I'm doing my job. They're doing their job. And I think that goes also with social media managers as well. I think I have to mention that, because the poor people who run those accounts, I happened to meet one of them. It was when I was in Puerto Rico covering Fantasy Island, and we were talking. I mean, the 911 shows are so fun to cover, but the fans are intense. They are incredibly intense, and it might not be as intense as, say, maybe like a Marvel show, but it's still a lot, and you still take a lot of those things to heart. So I was like, I had to find a way to disconnect myself a little bit from that. And obviously certain parts of fandoms are better than others. And I'm more than happy to focus on the people that continue to support my work and who were effectively still on my side through it all. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was perfect all season. I mean, there were things that I wish I couldn't have redone or could have said differently. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show. I mean, yes,
indeed,
the power to change culture if they are incredibly successful, but it's television. It's fictional. I mean, at the end of the day, in the future, at the end, a long time from now, when the 911 shows do come to an end, I mean, you'll look back on more. I think people will look back more fondly on what happened in the show rather than what some journalists had to say about it. So I think it's, and the great thing about it is, I won't say who I've talked to, but I've had great conversations with journalists and even actors on these shows who have helped me realize that it's simply part of the job. I mean, they are the people who have to deal with fandom hate anyway, sometimes, usually. Unfortunately, that is the case. But they have great ways of kind of disconnecting themselves from it, not reading comments. I mean, for me, for example, I don't go on Tumblr. I keep myself to maybe like 2 social media apps, tops. That's it. And what you see is what you get. I mean, that's just what it is. I think part of the reason why people either love me or hate me or have whatever feelings they might have about my work has to do with the fact that I am brutally honest about how I feel about the shows, how I feel about covering the shows. And it's something that I've just learned to take in stride. I mean, it comes with the territory. I understand where they're coming from because I, first and foremost, am a fan of the shows. I mean, I can't sit here and just say like, oh, like I've completely disconnected myself from the fandom. I can't do that. There's some great people who I've met through those spaces, but it's just about kind of finding the right balance and realizing that not everything is about the journalist. It's more so about the show and really starting important conversations about what's happening within the show rather than who's covering it. So that's basically just my way of looking at it. I've thought about it more than I probably should, but I think that's probably where I've landed at this point.
That is how it goes. And for any of our audience who is not as in and involved in these spaces, you can go back to our March 19th show where I kind of gave the run through on everything that was happening that weekend. And we had some great conversations about that. So if you missed that and want more context for what we're talking about around this article, feel free to check that out as well. But with that, I want to jump into us talking about how we interact with like these stories and the representation and the future as fans in a manner where, you know, we can be vocal and speak out on the issues we're seeing in a manner that's not attacking any particular person. So I put in our notes, our show doc, our famed show doc, trying very hard not to include a slight yelling about disability representation bullet point. But I feel like you set it up so perfectly, so I'm gonna have to dive into this. JJ and Alexis have been subjected to this kind of rant many a times, but I have one question for you, Max, and that is, can you list 3 named disabled characters in the entire 911 universe?
I mean, the only one that comes straight to mind is Christopher. Like, that is personally one of my favorite characters in the entire universe. Gavin McHugh is incredible.
Amazing.
I talked to him last fall, and he was just a ray of sunshine. I mean, everything that you would hope he would be, he was exactly that. But I mean, I can only think of Christopher. Yeah. There isn't much representation.
I say 3 because that's as many as I can name.
Okay.
So we have Christopher, of course. We have Frank, who's there. He's chilling. And then there's Gladys, who is, if you don't know Gladys, she was in, oh my gosh, I think it's 316. She's the deaf woman in the apartment building in the scene where we get the beloved by fanfiction line, "You want to do a rope rescue? Of course you do." But she's literally on screen for like less than 5 minutes and has 0 lines. But
and they think she's a cat.
And they think she's a cat. But when we're looking at these shows and seeing who they choose to represent in their stories, for me especially, it's really disheartening because when we're talking about emergency response and first responders and that world, there's so many interesting and dynamic stories we can talk about with the struggles that come being a disabled person in emergency response situations, and the fact that these shows have so much opportunity to go through with that and don't, has been one of my biggest disappointment moments. So I want to throw this question to all of you. What is the one piece of these shows that moving forward, what story do you want to see? Where do you want them to take a character or an arc or anything like that?
Oof, that's a loaded question.
Alexis, your face looks like you have strong feelings. If you want to go,
it's more like dread.
Okay.
But listen, I feel like this is a little bit of a hot take, and it's certainly, I don't think I promised I wasn't going to share hot takes in front of Max Gal, but here we are.
Go for it.
And I certainly don't think it's the part of the show that maybe needs to be improved the most. But having just finished season 3 of Lone Star, I really want more Carlos-centric work in season 4. I got to a point where it really felt like most of his arc in the show was only in relation to TK. Like, I think about like his arc with his parents, which we only saw when TK was there. Like we got to see a little bit of this arc into maybe being a detective, which I thought was a good contrast to Athena's arc of not wanting to move in that direction. But I did think it was a little strange that over 3 seasons, I can name maybe 4 pieces of cases that Carlos has worked. So I think I want TK and Carlos to more resemble Eddie and Buck's dynamic, in that I feel like I get full stories from Buck and full stories from Eddie and then stories of them together. And I think it more closely resembles Hen and Karen's dynamic, where I get full stories about Hen and then occasionally get a related story of Karen. So I would like more of that in season 4. That's what I'll go with.
Especially since not having Michelle around. Carlos really has fallen to the wayside.
I have said my hot take everywhere. I hope that in the future, for season 6 of 911, that they use the beginning of season 6 to just retry with Lucy. Just like clean slate retry. I think it's very, I think the whole, I was very excited for, because I love Ariel as an actress. Like when she was announced, and I had to like sit and think about all the shows that she's been on before. And I was like, I have grown up with this woman on my screen in every emotionally charged television show of my life. So then getting to this one, the current emotionally charged TV show of my life, I was like, oh, this is incredible. when the words "a female version of Buck" appeared in an article the first time talking about Lucy, I could just feel my heart sink. Because I think it's, first of all, we had already had, like, Taylor was introduced as Buckette, quote from the show. And so it was very interesting. I was like, oh, and not even just like the idea of them being romantically involved or however, or the kiss or whatever. I just was very confused and very disheartened about the first regular female firefighter on the show since the beginning with Hen was just going to be a female version of a male character instead of a fully formed. And there's all obviously very fully formed thoughts of who Lucy was going to be throughout the season, and however that was effective or not effective in 5B. I just think season 6 would be a really great opportunity to just hit the reset button a little bit on Lucy. And because I remember my favorite moment of Lucy in season 5B was her one little conversation with Ravi when Hen and Shimmy were like,
Lucy and Ravi together.
They came on my screen together. I was like, this is my favorite dynamic now. I want to see more of this. And they didn't do anything, but it was like really one of the first times where I felt like Lucy was like a character who existed in the world instead of a character who was floating above the world as an idea. And I was like, oh, it all became like real for a second. And so I would very much like a reset on Lucy. Give me a B shift episode with Lucy and Ravi and just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, I'll echo those things. I mean, I would love to see more of Carlos in Lone Star. I think Raphael is one of the best actors on that cast. And the fact that he's been underused it just doesn't sit right with me. I mean, he is incredibly criminally underrated. And from the conversations I've had with him, I think he's just really, really passionate about telling the story. And I do think that going forward, he just wants to see more of Carlos. So absolutely more of Carlos. More of all the underserved characters. I mean, we have Grace. Who else?
I'm gonna throw out Tommy Vega. I cannot believe.
I love Gina Torres. So absolutely Tommy, Paul, Marjan. I mean, I'll be honest. I talked to Natasha at the start of the season, and she was telling me all these incredible things about what could happen with Marjan this season. And I think midway through, for whatever reason, Marjan kind of fell off a little bit. I mean, we didn't see as much of her. We only saw her with Paul, I think, and then there were little bits here and there where she was interacting with the other firefighters. And then obviously with the 118 kind of the hangouts as well. But I would have loved to see more of her, and I do hope that there is more of that next season. And then the original, yes, like they have so many characters at this point. I just want to see more of them. And after 5 seasons, like I said, you've mined so many stories for them. There's only so many you can go, only so much you can explore. So I think just putting them in different environments would be really interesting. So I mean, having Eddie go through his entire arc kind of on his own away from the 118 was important. And just kind of having these characters live and exist and continue to evolve and have room to make mistakes. I think that's the most important thing. So I'm ready for whatever's coming next.
For sure. I just want to echo that with I know we've seen a lot from quotes from the creatives that are like, you want your favorite characters to be in these dramatic situations because that's how they get screen time. But I'm just really exhausted with the only queer stories being centered around trauma, and I would love to see more dramatic storylines that don't rely on trauma. Give us more of the fun Hen and Karen going on a detective moment. That's still dramatic, it's conflict, it's fun, but it's not so deeply rooted in trauma, and I really want to see more of that going through. Before we bring back Liz and Marissa, just kind of jump off this and share what's your favorite moments from the show? Where, if you have the moment where you really fell in love with the show, I can share mine. The moment where I really fell in love with this show is Thomas and Mitchell, the old gays from 2A. They like I was watching through 911, and the Connie Britton show didn't really do it for me. And then we got to Buck actually, and I was like, wow, I'm really sold on the show. So much love for Thomas and Mitchell.
May they rest in peace.
May they rest in peace.
Oh boy. I'm trying to jog my memory back. There's so much stuff that happens.
Indeed.
I mean, this is exactly what happened. I think someone at one point asked me, "What's my favorite quote from 911?" I was like, "Where do I even begin?" This show is built around sound bites. There's like these little,
that's a good point.
Like, earth-shattering lines that are used in edits, and I've seen them, and I know a lot of what people want to see, but I mean, I don't even know. I'll say the scene that made me want to binge the show was the last scene of episode 303 of the original, when Eddie brings Christopher over to Buck's apartment to kind of show that they're okay, and I mean, he trusts him more than anyone. I think that scene is for a lot of people what got them to start the show as well. And I do think that is one of the central dynamics of the show, like kind of the heart of the show. So to see them continue to evolve, I think that would be great. Even if it's not in a romantic sense, I do think that this is something that we just have not seen on television before. So I'm all for it if they want to continue exploring that going forward.
I think I have.
I know you were also a big fan of the snake in Lone Star.
The snake in Lone Star. What happened to the snake? Anyway.
Listen,
Liz
if we're going to talk about the snake, I'm coming back on. This is my bread and butter, people. I know nothing except that was the best moment of television I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my
JJ,
goodness.
please start. Sorry, it's been a great conversation. I'll leave again, but
no, you can hang out.
Is this
bring
the
it back.
snake? What snake are we talking about?
Okay.
Is this the snake that went after Judd, or the lizard that got loose in the house? Okay.
No.
There was multiple snake gates.
There's
a lizard, which is one of my favorite moments of season 3.
The snake was one of the biggest moments of like pure stakes building in 911 Lone Star, like just classic stakes building, and then it just went off into like a log. And when they were when he was trying to drag Judd, I fully thought that snake was going to start chasing him as they were trying to drag Judd away. Didn't happen.
1,000%.
That entire scene, I was focused. When is the snake coming back? When is the snake going to keep the stakes up? And it never happened. And Snake Gate, what happened?
I will say it is odd that the lizard gets rescued and the lizard was actually in a man's leg and nobody rescues the snake. I mean, that may be the next, like, Charlo's pet. Maybe the snake. They may go back and get it.
I will say, Sophia, in the comments, I also had a huge crush on young Athena. She was great.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta say, the moment that I think it's a moment, Sly, you might know this, because I bring this moment up in literally connection to everything about Eddie.
Are you gonna say lesbians in the car?
Yes, lesbians in the car. The lesbians in the car. Best characters in the whole. I remember watching that for the first time. Okay, this is a whole other side tangent. Watching the lesbians in the car for the first time and seeing like the sparks of like flirting and sitting there being like, are they flirting? Are they lesbians? And then that moment actually existing was like the validation and gratification as a bisexual person that I just had never, like, it's one of those things that I never thought I'd experience. And every time I do get to have like a moment to experience that, it's like changes you. I
watched the crossover and messaged Sly and was like, are they flirting? It feels like they're flirting. Are TK and Buck flirting? Is that what's happening right now? Are they flirting?
And then Eddie walks up anyway.
And then I proceeded to send Alexis like 10 fanfics that are post-crossover.
The best part about being friends with Sly is if you're watching something for the first time and you happen to mention anything about any character at any point in time, Sly immediately sends you 10 edits of that moment and a corresponding fanfic.
It was a well-organized list.
It's a good list.
It was well done, yeah. Sorry, JJ, go ahead.
The moment that made me, I don't want to say fall in love with the show, but the moment that changed the way I feel about the show is the moment in the grocery store when Eddie breaks and goes, "You're exhausting." And
Red, we can't talk about it. It has haunted me since the day I watched it.
That moment informs everything for me. Every single time that they interact, every time the team is all together in a stressful character situation, everything always goes back to that moment for me for some reason or another. But because I think it's about like it's character breaking, it's like dynamics boiling over. There's a build up to it over a long period of time. It was just one of those seeds that just like hit. And every time they have a moment together where like Buck is like expressing something like an insecurity, or it always goes back to that moment for me when Eddie called him exhausting, and and
anytime I have an insecurity, it goes back to that moment for me.
Well, one of my
quickly,
favorite.
I would like to share my moment very quickly before we go back to a serious conversation, which was when the huge reveal happened in the same episode with the snake that Judd had a son. I know that was a huge reveal for everybody that watched that moment, and it wasn't just me on the couch being like,
huge
wait,
reveal a couple episodes before that.
That was the moment where I said, wait, did we all know this, or did I just learn this for the first time? And in fact, it was just me, because that's why you don't watch 911 in 15-minute intervals. But I will say, if there was a writer in that writer's room that said, listen, if someone's never watched the show, let's give them a big reveal moment. They nailed it.
That was me watching ER out of order. What do you mean she was with George Clooney?
My favorite writer choice was when they decided to take noted technophobe Eddie Diaz and put him in charge of running Twitter. Speaking of Twitter, Marissa runs our Twitter. Let's bring her back.
Mr.
1 billion
LAFD
followers.
Updates man. Mr. LAFD updates man.
1 million followers, can't work a Hildy, can't work an Amazon Echo. What is going on?
Iconic transition, Sly. Kudos to you.
It was like pulling teeth to get there, but now we're here. And now we have 4 comms people on one call. Oh no.
I can't sing my song.
What song?
The song usually goes 3 comms people.
But yeah.
Well, it's just 4 comms people now. I want to say that was a very wonderful panel to watch. Thank you all so much for your commentary on that. It was very enlightening. It's been such a joy to watch bits and pieces of this conversation unfold on our show, on Twitter, through your work, Max, on Thirsty Thursdays with JJ and Sly. So to see it all come into one place was truly a treat. So thank you all for being here. And while we have you for a few more minutes, there's like a couple other hot topics I think we can dive into all together. I really want to start with Marissa and mine's favorite show of the moment, very selfishly, since we've been away for the past hour, which is Bridgerton. We're a big Bridgerton show. We rarely talk about it because it took a long time for some of us to catch up. Alexis.
We'll get
there eventually.
Sly hasn't even dipped their toes in.
We've got a ways to go. But Max, you did this beautiful piece with Jonathan Bailey, headed into the latest season where he is our lead. And you had this tweet where I'm not sure if you ever followed up with what the comment was, but you did share that Jonathan Bailey followed up with you with a lovely comment about your questions, with the funniest comment you ever heard while wrapping an interview. Do you remember this tweet?
Maybe, I think, yeah.
So I'm curious what it was like to interview him, where he was doing so much press at that time with, like, you know, everything from the funny kind of viral video style interviews that have less journalistic integrity and more like trying to get a hit TikTok, and balancing that with like the kind of work that you do, which is more serious, and the profile pieces. I mean, this was for Harper's Bazaar, and it's a very great Q&A in my opinion.
Beautiful answers.
So how did it feel for you in that moment to hear from him that he had an enjoyable experience with you, and just what was that experience like?
Well, it's funny because you say he did a lot of press, and that's true, but like he did a lot of the press with his 2 kind of co-leads that season. We have Teresa, who plays the younger Sharma sister, Edwina, who's kind of fresh-faced, and she's kind of the one who unfortunately is caught in this love triangle. And then there was Simone to his other side, who plays Kate, obviously. But most of that was, like you said, very quick 4 or 5 minute intervals, very, very quickly answering the same questions over and over again. And he actually was doing, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was doing a play in the West End of London for like during the press and everything. So they were able to basically fit him in this one little kind of window that he had between shows. Maybe there was an understudy who was filling in for him as well. But he had done so much press, and I first found out about the interview in January. Had to keep it a secret until March, but nothing happened until like mid-March, and I was like, wait a second, are we going to do something? Is this actually going to happen? Because I didn't want to say anything if it wasn't going to happen, but I knew how much people loved the show, like a lot of the people in this panel right now. And basically, I had worked with his rep, and he actually talked to me after one of his shows. Like he had done like a full day of like prepping for the show. And he just gotten home. I think it was the middle of the night, and he was nice enough to do a few Zoom interviews with people. So that was lovely because I wasn't the one who set it up. I didn't have to do all of that. And he was just as charming as you would expect. So lovely. And it's funny because I'll give you a tidbit here. Some of the stuff that he talked about did not make it into the final piece. So if you think the final piece is great, the transcript that I have is pretty spectacular. And I did share some little tidbits in the thread. If you go to my profile, you can see the pinned tweet. And then later on in the thread, I do share a couple of excerpts that didn't make the cut. But I mean, he was great. And I think what he appreciated more is that these are actors. So what I've noticed is that actors love to talk about their craft. And they put so much thought into the scenes and the way they deliver the lines and everything like that. So the moment that they are able to recognize that someone has clearly done their research, they clearly care about the show just as much as they do. They're like, well, this is my chance. Don't know when it's going to happen again, but let me do it now. So he just rattled off so many things, and it was just great, and it was so lovely to chat. And I think what really stuck out to me was, like you said, Liz, at the end of the interview, he did say that it was great chatting with me, and he would love to do it in the future again. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. You have arguably one of the biggest actors in the world, part of probably the biggest English language show on Netflix, saying that they would love to spend another 20 minutes, half an hour talking to you about their character, just their character, and watching that continue to progress. I mean, that was pretty special. I think that is definitely one of the highlights of the last couple of years that I've been able to do this, because I've noticed, because I started in tennis, in sports, and I do notice that the athletes, they're really great at talking points. But with actors, they are really, really willing to dig deep, and they are really willing to go into their process and talk about those important things. So I think that was what really struck me about it, because yes, at the end of the day, a good interview is a good conversation. So if you're able to connect on a personal level, I think that just makes the entire thing more rich and better for everyone in the long run. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed that interview, because I worked pretty hard on that one.
With that, one of my favorite things about you is your ability to kind of craft questions that are really intriguing, that draw out really, thoughtful answers from the people you're working with. So I'm just curious if you have anybody that you draw inspiration from in your interview style, how you kind of go about crafting those questions.
Well, it's interesting because I always say that it would be incredibly naive for me as a journalist to not read other people's work, because like the best way to become a better writer is to read more, right? I think that's just, I don't think it's a saying, but just common knowledge. People do that all the time. So whenever I'm prepping for an interview, I take a deep dive. I mean, I start Googling, I start watching YouTube videos. I mean, I don't have as much time, so I usually watch those videos at like twice the speed, but just very quickly, just going through questions they've answered before and seeing how I can build on that, or how I can approach it differently. I think I don't have anyone that comes to mind right now. I mean, maybe if I thought about it more, maybe I would, but I think honestly, a lot of the journalists that I follow on Twitter, a lot of them who work in the same business, especially the ones that work at like the big newspapers, like the New York Times, those are people that consistently like amaze me with the quality of their work, and for good reason. Obviously, they are kind of at the top of entertainment journalism. So I think maybe my approach is just being able to find a way to strike the right balance between analytical questions and maybe more fun questions. I mean, it doesn't always have to be all serious. I mean, yes, topics of representation and diversity and cultural authenticity, they are all incredibly important, but sometimes just actors want to talk about their favorite scenes, their favorite moments from the show. or they want to break down their favorite scene, like things like that. I think that's where we are able to connect, and I think that's where they were both able to recognize where our strengths lie. Because I mean, like I said, I'm only doing this as a freelance kind of thing. I'm not committed to any specific outlet. So when I do it for fun. But I'm also very, very aware of the responsibility that comes with it.
Such a balanced approach. And I really respect your take on like interview prep by person as opposed to by style or by, I think, especially in this age where it's such a saturated interview market where you see every single piece taken and posted to different platforms in such very interesting and like finite ways. It's always wonderful to read a piece that did get that extra angle that doesn't feel like the same talking point that we've seen in the 10 TikTok edits on our For You page. So kudos to you. I know we're at time. I have one more fun question to ask everyone on the panel here. So JJ, also feel free to chime in. We talk a lot on the show about fan community, right? You talked a little bit about that during the segment, but I'm curious, like we're headed for 911 and 911 Lone Star into a season of hiatus, right? Where people are going to go watch something different perhaps because they're going to rewatch the show if you're like some of us on the panel that are just going to start over from scratch and digest the whole story again. But for everyone on the show, while 911's parked, where are we going next? Are we rewatching? Are we diving into something new? There's some big shows that have just released yesterday, like Stranger Things, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Disney Plus. I feel like Marissa and I think we both went straight to Star Wars yesterday. But where are we going next, team? What are we watching? What are we thinking about? And how are we filling the time until 911 comes back?
Great question. It's funny because now that I talk to like my friends who like don't work in the business and who are just have kind of seen me do my thing in this world, they're constantly asking me for like TV recommendations, and I never know what to tell them because the TV that I normally watch, I have to watch for work. Like it's gotten to this point where I don't watch TV necessarily for fun unless I really want to and I really have the time. So like a lot of my recommendations are things that I've thoroughly analyzed, I've gone through.
Listen, Max, the best thing that ever happened to me was Is It Cake? Because I don't have to put any critical review into Is It Cake? That's the show that I put on when I'm sick of Moon Knight. I'm like, no, we're going straight into Is It Cake for an hour.
I mean, okay. I mean, I'm going to plug this at this point, but basically there's a show on the CW called Kung Fu. It's the first network drama to feature a predominantly all Asian cast. So it's groundbreaking in that sense. It was actually the show that kind of put me on the map a little bit. It gave me so many incredible opportunities, like writing for the New York Times. So like that show will always hold a special place in my heart. I think they're about to wrap up the second season. So if people want to end up binging the first two seasons on HBO Max or the CW app, they're great. Thoroughly recommend it. I mean, I can probably talk more about shows that are coming out soon-ish because I have things. Well, there was another one. I don't know if you guys have talked about Heartstopper, but that was easily one of my favorite shows of the year.
Just watched Heartstopper.
I mean,
JJ was a big fan.
It was so lovely. And I didn't even expect, I got a chance to talk to the two leads for that a couple weeks ago. And that was incredible. That was amazing. As for shows that are coming back, I think, well, like not coming back, I think Love Victor, the final season, I've watched it. I can't talk about it until next week, actually. But so
we'll all have your Twitter notifications on for next week when Max
I'm working on a piece about the finale right now for the LA Times. So there's a lot to dig into. It's only 8 episodes this time around, so they fit a lot of story into that little basically 4 hours of television to wrap up the story. What else was there? I mean, I've been watching Queer as Folk. That's coming out on Peacock next month. What else is there?
JJ, is there anything you want to? Max, do you want to think for a second? And JJ, do you want to start pitching something you've been watching?
I actually can dive in next because my hiatus show is because it has been taking over my Twitter feed in the best way with all your tweets. Is Kung Fu is next on my list. That's going to be my hiatus show. So I'm very excited to jump into that.
My hiatus show is what I'm currently watching, which to anyone who knows me is no surprise, is Alias just got added to Disney Plus if you're in America.
Oh, yeah.
And if you know me, I am a Jennifer Garner, like very big fan, and that show was very informative to my life and who I am as a person.
If you want more JJ yelling about Jennifer Gardner, go check out the MCU University episode of Elektra. Got that plug in.
I would recommend that is always a recommendation of mine, and it always jumps from platform, and like it'll be like a year off of streaming, and then it'll come back, and then but it's now on Disney Plus, and hopefully it'll stay there for a while. That I think this was a movie, not necessarily a television show, which is rare for me, as we all know that I don't do movies. But the Hulu original Crush, I think, was something that got very much overshadowed in the same week of release of Heartstopper. I have some complicated feelings about the movie, but it was one of the like a big queer movie that made me genuinely laugh out loud and was sweet. And I think Ali Carvalho is incredible in it, and very like an understated, beautiful performance in it. So I very much recommend that. And then the future release, I think if She-Hulk, lands, She-Hulk will be probably one of the best TV shows of the MCU. If it lands right, it's gonna be so good. And so that's what I will also be binging all of 911 and Lone Star because why not?
You're like Alexis. You got to go right back to square one and then watch the whole thing over again. I respect it. We respect it here. And both of you have been incredible. I'll let each of you sign off. Let the people know where you are, what's coming next for you. Plug anything you want to plug. I know we definitely want to plug the amazing new Simu profile that Max just released, which is Chef's Kiss. And as the only other Canadian on this show, we got to just say Canadians covering Canadians is always lovely to see. So Max, where can people find you? What are you talking about next?
And also, I want to add to that real quick. You were talking a lot about how this was a big milestone moment for you. What's the next future big milestone moment for you as well?
In terms of interview or just in terms of work?
Work, interview, whatever you want.
Oh boy. Well,
no pressure.
Yeah. Okay. So very quickly, I just had a couple like uplifting shows that I remember I didn't talk about. Abbott Elementary, incredible sitcom, and Ghosts. Those are two of my favorite new shows that if you need a pick me up, it's definitely the way to go. So for me, you can find me at Max J. Gao on Twitter and Max_Gao on Instagram. In terms of what's next for me, I don't know. I'm very lucky to be a freelancer, like I said, so I can choose the kind of stories I want to write. So I have some exciting stuff coming out about Fire Island. I have a bunch of interviews for that. Love the people involved over there. I might have some stuff for Queer as Folk. There's a Becoming Elizabeth interview that's on Stars if you guys like historical dramas. But basically, I think for me, I reached the pinnacle when I interviewed Michelle Yeoh about Everything Everywhere All at Once. Again, incredible movie. Thoroughly recommend it. But I think, very, very long time ago, I think someone asked me like, who's on your bucket list? And I was like, I don't know who could be next. I think there's so many incredible people. Zendaya, 911 related, Angela Bassett. Incredibly powerful, influential, I think actors are next up on my list. The sky is the limit. I didn't expect to talk to Simu, for example. So that was a pleasant surprise when I got the assignment. So, anything's possible. I am going to be in California in the summer, I think in late July, early August, to cover the TCAs, which is just a fancy way of saying like all of these new shows are coming out. There's a very specific group of journalists who come together and basically cover the shows, do the interviews, and then we thank them for when the shows actually come out. So I will be there. If there's anybody in California who wants to meet up, let me know.
Sly's like, before the show, I accidentally said that Sly was living in California. Sly's like, I'm fully living in California now that I have this information.
Well, let me know. Anything's possible, and I would obviously love to come back. Thank you guys so much for inviting me and for all the lovely questions. It's not very often I get to be on the other side of the interview and actually answering stuff. So this has been very, very lovely.
We're so happy to have had you. This is Sly's milestone for the show, was to try and bring you on to talk about 911 Lone Star. So this has been a treat.
Absolutely, when we were having all our big, brand conversations with the rebrand, one of those like pie in the sky dreams, I was like, I want us to get to a point where we can sit down and interview somebody like Scow, for example. So to finally be able to make this happen has been such a pleasure.
You're Sly's Michelle. It's like,
Exactly.
could you imagine?
You gotta aim higher, Sly. I'm telling you. You gotta aim higher.
JJ, where can people find you? What's coming up for you?
You can find me at JJBWayWatch on TikTok and Twitter, talking about queer rep, queer representation, the difference between queer bait, queer coding, and all of those terms that no one seems to know what they are.
You're doing the hard emotional work, and I mean that quite seriously, to try and shed some light, which I think is very important.
You can tell I'm getting to the end of my rope when I start doing videos with the glass of wine in my hand. This is becoming more frequent. I have a couple videos stocked up now, and it's just like, well, okay. Yeah. Anyway.
So let me get some exclusive confirmation. Even though 911 Lone Star is on hiatus, as we're between seasons, this is not the end of Thirsty Thursdays, is it?
No, this is not the end of Thirsty Thursdays, because you can also find me and Sly on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, having a little Thirsty Thursday where we pour ourselves a drink and spill some hot takes and tea. For the past couple of weeks, we've been doing 911 and 911 Lone Star. Last week, or this week, because we didn't have a new episode, we tried to talk about what alcoholic drink or non-alcoholic drink, for the non-alcohol drinker characters, would each of the characters on 911 and Lone Star drink. The types of beer, the types of wine. Are they a white wine? Are they a red wine? Are they dry? Are they
the
sweet?
Important canon that we need to know.
I'm begging him to turn it into a TikTok series. Like, I think you just need to take the list and do, I would watch the hell out of that.
JJ, make the list. Send it to Max.
We have the list.
Into the next season of interviews. Please confirm or deny for us. Listen,
we have these lists. I'm sorry though. I couldn't get away with the fact that Eddie, who lived in Texas and then went into the army, was drinking these artisan beers, and Buck, who was a bartender in Peru, was drinking not. I was just like, what? Props. As a theater person, those are the things that get me. As a person who did a lot of props and set dressing and set building and stuff. So we did a show that was set in New York, and there was a Duke's mayonnaise, and I was like, what are you doing?
So we'll continue the chaos on Thursdays. I'm glad we got the exclusive. The show's not ended. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this week. And we will keep the conversation rolling when we get info on when 911 is returning. 911 Lone Star is returning.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Thank you, team.
Thank
you.
Bye. All right.
I have to
Here
go
we go,
scream
team.
now. It's fine.
You did such a good job.
That was a wonderful panel.
Yes.
We're so proud of, we love when we hit a little milestone. I wish we had some confetti to throw right now, but alas, we have yet to program that button into the show. Let's keep the conversation going around what we're watching, what we think other people should watch in our Under the Radar segment. I mentioned when we had everyone on screen, yesterday was a big release day. It was Stranger Things, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Disney Plus, Netflix, a little bit of a show-off moment. And I thought it was really interesting because Obi-Wan Kenobi, did it not come as a little bit of a surprise that we were getting it this week? I don't think it really was, but it was a surprise to the people at the Star Wars convention that they got to watch it early. At least for me, it felt like I was convinced I was going to watch Stranger Things first. And then when I heard everyone else got to watch it early, I was like, no, I must watch this now. I cannot wait any longer. So I've now seen both of the first 2 episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, first 3 episodes of the new season of Stranger Things. My mind is I don't even know how I'm doing this show because I'm still thinking about both of those shows. And my mind's predicting and making new canon and new fanon and is drawing conspiracy webs between all of these characters. And there's a lot going on. So my question for everybody watching, get in the comments, and for everyone on screen, have you watched either or? And if so, which did you watch first?
So here's the thing. I'm very much a huge Star Wars fan. I have been since I knew what movies were. Like, I love Star Wars, right? And it's not something I try to talk about often because it's something I want to enjoy for myself and not enjoy as a content personality, right? I was so excited to dive into Obi-Wan either last night or this morning, and I planned so much on sitting down today and watching those episodes, and then I got anxiety, so instead I binged The West Wing this morning.
Valid.
Once we get to it, Obi-Wan is definitely gonna be. I haven't watched any of Stranger Things, so.
Yeah, I was pretty vocal about this yesterday, and I got into a little bit of trouble because I thought it was gone. I had not seen the prequels until yesterday, and I really thought I was gonna, like, you know, coast for a while, graduate college, you know, coast for 2 weeks, graduate college, watch the prequels, catch up on Kenobi, because I'm very excited to watch it. But then I went to twitter.com and I saw one spoiler and I could not wait. I needed to see it immediately. And so I spent the last 24 hours watching the prequels. And I had a great time. Stranger Things, I don't care about.
A very important question for you, Marissa.
Yes.
Have you seen Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the animated movie?
The movie?
The movie. It's my favorite Star Wars. That's my hot take. It's my favorite Star Wars movie of all time. You gotta watch it. I'm sorry.
I love that.
That's when you know you're on the right side of the Star Wars fandom. Honestly, when people are talking about that, I'm like, okay, I'm safe here. This is a safe conversation for me to be in.
I grew up with a sibling obsessed with the Clone Wars series, so I feel like I've absorbed a lot of that, but not the movie.
The Clone Wars, the series is great, but the movie is just like everything I could ever want in a Star Wars property. So,
Alexis, where are you? Are you doing Stranger Things? Are you doing Obi-Wan Kenobi? No.
I feel like on a personal note, Star Wars was something that was very hard for me to get into as a kid because the community and the fandom just weren't very welcoming to new people. So it was very hard. Like, no matter how many times I watched the movies, I still felt like I didn't know enough to have a conversation about it. And even if I'm just watching media, for me, I think everybody knows I like to talk about it. It's what I like to do, right? So not being able to have an avenue where I felt like I could discuss it really limited my becoming a Star Wars fan. However, we are very much a Star Trek house, a Star Trek original series house. So I have really been enjoying being able to dive into Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is also pretty new right now. So that's kind of what I've been enjoying.
I was very fortunate that I was, as the youngin here, I was the age of like the target audience for the prequels when they're coming out. Like, the first movie I remember physically watching is episode 3. Like, I can tell you exactly what was happening as I was watching episode 3.
I constantly forget this fact about you, and then when I am reminded, it blows my mind.
So like the prequels were targeted at, you know, kids, right? Kids who were children of Star Wars adults, right? And so I was very much in that grouping, and I am very fortunate that was my interaction with the properties.
See, my problem is that I was all of those things, but my Star Wars parent did not show them to me and my brother because we were terrified of everything.
Yeah.
So, like, you guys know how scared I was to see Multiverse of Madness. Like, I was not going to be watching Anakin Skywalker when I was like 6.
I still remember our family going to see them in theaters and Anakin like falling. There's the whole bit where he like falls and gets half like burned practically alive, this whole bit. And my mother reaching over me to smack her hand over my brother's eyes, like, is my very firm like Star Wars.
I remember it was the summer that DVD came out. I was on a boat in the cabin of my best friend's boat, and it was on a portable DVD player, and we watched it together for the first time. And so it was like, the screen was probably this big, and we watched episode 3 for the first time together, and it was a great moment.
Incredible, truly. I want to talk about both of these shows more in the future when more people have had a chance to like watch them, maybe catch up on some of it. There's like so much to unpack and unravel with both of these shows. But I do want to say there's some pieces that are coming out, which I think are important to talk about with both of these shows, which is when you start Stranger Things specifically, there's a new warning that comes up before you watch, which is that like the show was planned and filmed and edited years ago, a long time ago, and is not meant to be timely with the current events of the world. And the same can be said for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And if you're going to watch either of these shows and you're feeling very rightfully so sensitive to the tragic events out of Texas and what this whole conversation has become, which I'm not going to say because we're trying to avoid the bots coming to the comments and ruining our safe space for everyone. But if that's a situation that has made you want to take a step back, both of these shows should not be what you turn to for solace. And I find it really interesting that more forewarning was not put on Obi-Wan Kenobi, that it has the exact same or I shouldn't say exact same, but like a similar tone to the opening of Stranger Things. So I put that out there because the conversation's kind of starting now that people are having a chance to catch up and make these connections and compare and contrast both of the shows. But certainly it's jarring and should be taken into account if you're looking for a safe show to watch as a refuge away from the events of the world. Both of those shows will not provide that for you at this time. However, I do want to say about Stranger Things, this is not a spoiler, Sadie Sink, who is also our heroine of the All Too Well short film, directed and produced by Taylor Swift, is slaying the house down on Stranger Things this season. Oh my God, if you're looking for a standout performance, we're talking Emmy nomination in the bag for Sadie Sink for Stranger Things. So if you're looking for something fresh that's going to take you by surprise, this season of Stranger Things is living up to the hype, and it's highly worth it in my opinion. So that's my under the radar for this week, wrapped up nicely with a bow. And from there, why don't I pass it over to Marissa, who had a big week in terms of waking up to a text from me.
I did.
Which set up the tone for your entire week, I think.
Well, Liz sent a text very upset.
In the group chat.
Yes, everyone saw this text. Liz sent a text very upset because she would not get to see the New York City Center's encore performance of Into the Woods transfer to Broadway because she will be in New York during the time between the City Center run and the Broadway run. Mm-hmm. I, however, was thrilled because I had been waiting weeks for the Broadway transfer announcement. And so that is my under the radar for this week, is Into the Woods is back on Broadway starting June 28th. The same day as the first episode of Only Murders in the Building.
So can't wait.
It's very big deal. I'm very excited. I am gonna figure out a way to get to New York to see that show within its little 8-week run. It's just the most incredible cast. Sarah Bareilles is the baker's wife. Brian Darcy James, famed dad of Kate Bishop, is the baker.
Famed dad of Kate Bishop.
Famed dad of Kate Bishop.
I don't think he's never been introduced that.
Also, not so famed dad on Smash, like very bad dad on that lovely series.
Well, because we spent all of Hawkeye being like, "Where is Brian Darcy James? Is he ever going to come back?" He didn't.
It's true.
So
I need someone to now tell him that that's how he was introduced on this show. Of all of the credits
that's going in the highlight reel.
Yeah.
I forgot. I went to a talk back with him for West Side Story. I can get in contact with him and be like, "Hey, did you know you are Kate Bishop's dad on our show?"
I still want to know what bet he lost that ended him up on that show. Like there was some interview I was listening to not too long ago about like a show that I will not name, and how like a bunch of people ended up on this show because all of these famous actors played poker together, and they would bet on like guest spots and like, you have to come on my show and do this. And it was a whole thing. Right. And so anytime like a Brian Darcy James shows up for 5 minutes on Hawkeye, I'm like, what poker game did you lose to be here?
That's also how I felt about the people that were hired to do the songs and choreography for Rogers the Musical, but I'll digress on that point. Sly, what is your under the radar for this week?
So I don't think it's under a certain group's radar, but it certainly is under this audience's radar. We got the teaser trailer for Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to the game Jedi Fallen Order, which feels very much like they're trying to build off the current hype around Star Wars with the Obi-Wan show. And the teaser trailer got its hooks in me. It's all CGI, there's no gameplay. But I'm very excited to see what they're gonna do with that story, how they improve on the gameplay mechanics from the first one, and everything that's going along with that. If you want to see my first reaction to watching the trailer, we did that on our show last night on Point in Progress. I'm just putting all the plugs in here. Episode. I'm so sorry.
Listen, if Sly is not your favorite deaf queer Jane Austen fan on the internet, then what are you doing on this show? Go watch Sly everywhere. We are
at one point I was called out during the podcast on Point in Progress, where Mario made a comment about me always plugging We'll Throw the After Party, like relentlessly. And I was like, you have to understand, I plug Pip even more on We'll Throw the After Party. Like, it's not exclusive. I just plug all of my stuff everywhere.
Pip is the party. We'll Throw the After Party is the after party.
And that's how the schedule works. You have drinks on Thursday,
yes.
Then you go to the party on Friday.
You got a pregame
on Pip.
Then you get to the party.
And then you go to the after party on Saturdays.
How did we rebrand this entire show not knowing it just worked with Sly's social life? Like,
I would like to point out that stalking my husband across the internet is a spousal privilege. I claimed that this week.
Did you? Tell us more. Tell us more. Let's dig in.
Alexis and I were having a lovely conversation about how we're both terrified of making TikTok content anymore. And Alexis mentioned that she'll go back and watch some of my old videos. And I was shocked by this revelation. And Alexis tried to like downplay it because she didn't want to come off as like stalking me, which I totally get, totally understandable. But yeah, that I gave spousal privileges. If you want to stalk my backlog, you don't get to. But if you want to keep up to date with all the current stuff, feel free.
Well, isn't that just something?
You don't sound bitter at all.
I just have thoughts I'm not going to say on air. Alexis, please save me. What are you watching? What's under your radar?
I am being 100% honest with you when I tell you that the only content I consumed this week was 911 Lone Star.
And a Liz talk from me about the music industry. And the Liz talk
from the music industry, which was fantastic. I am getting ready to, I've talked a lot on here about like how my brain works in terms of rewatching. So I'm getting ready to go back through both shows and watch in terms of writers, like watch all of one writer's episodes together and kind of analyze the content that way, which I'm looking forward to. But I do want to plug Let the Women Do the Work, which is a podcast on the Obsessed Network by Jillian Pinsavalli. And she has been interviewing women that have been underreported and working on true crime cases. So like if there was, she did an interview with Rabia Chaudhry from Serial. She's kind of going through these cases and picking out like the female lawyer that did something really cool or the female prosecutor that pushed things further than anybody else. And giving them some interview time to kind of talk about their process and those types of things. There have been some really great interviews looking at the Indigenous population and the crime that is affecting them right now. And so if you were interested in any of that, I highly suggest it. It's on the Obsessed Network. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. That is like the only other media I've consumed. So we'll go with that one.
I love it. I love it. And just like that, we're at the top of the hour. How fun has this been doing a big 911 Lone Star party? I cannot believe that like we did it. The time has ended. It's come and gone. But luckily, the replay is available on YouTube for everyone who wants to relive the conversation, re-listen. And hello to everyone watching the replay. We see you every week tuning in, and we're so glad that you're here and listening back to the episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave some comments while you're at it, because we love hearing your thoughts on the show. I would like to make a plug before we formally close the show, which is that I'm about to become real obnoxious, more so than usual, because y'all are about to meet New York Liz, which I have not named this alter ego of myself, but everyone else in my life has told me, Liz, when you're in New York City, you are a different version of yourself. So what I would like to share is that while I'm in the city, I will be seeing Stephen Colbert, I'll be seeing Seth Meyers, and I'll be seeing Taylor Swift all live. So if you have things you would like to see from my adventures, make sure to come let me know in the comments of my TikTok or on Instagram, because I'll be vlogging all the adventures, meeting some creators along the way, which I'm very excited about. And on top of that, I need to give a big shout out to some of our creator friends, specifically Danielle and Eric and Victoria and Bucky and Marissa and Alexis and Sly and Ellie and Naira and Tyson and like this huge group of people. Who am I missing? Like 20 people. Hannah was another one. Oh my God, help me. There were so many of you. Dom was another one, that all came together over the past few weeks behind my back to make sure that I could get Harry Styles tickets, which was a very kind gesture from our communities. I want to say thank you on this platform to everyone that helped make that shining moment happen. And we can confirm the Harry Styles tickets were acquired. So if you're looking for a Multiverse of Madness TikTok Creator Edition, it is coming to you this Halloween.
Wait.
Marissa, tell the people more about what they're in for.
Maybe perhaps there's five of us, five creators.
Yeah,
I think
five creators. Yeah.
Well, I just gave some of us away. Maybe perhaps 5 of us will be meeting, maybe for the first time, maybe not for the first time, together to see a Harry Styles concert, maybe in the city of Los Angeles, and maybe, this is so crazy, on Halloween, maybe we might be having a crossover event.
And maybe there'll be Avengers Campus Halloween version content perhaps might be in store.
Every day there's a new possibility
of
for
what
this
could be.
It's so far away, but it feels like tomorrow. It's crazy.
It's truly going to be the crossover event of the century. It's like the Sweet Life on Deck of Hannah Montana, or if you remember that Disney Channel. It's that, but the TikTok version. So follow along for more of that chaos as it unfolds. If you want the story time, it's up on TikTok now at Danielle Silverstone and at producer Liz, so you can see more there. But friends, Alexis, Sly, Marissa, who would like to plug where they can be found on the internet and what's going on with you for the next few weeks? Who wants to go next? Marissa?
You already plugged me.
Sly's good. Sly's done.
You can find the pregame on Thursdays on TikTok Live at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find the party on Point in Progress on Friday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific. Sorry, I can't do time zone conversions right now. And you can find the after party here. You can also find me yelling about non-MCU Marvel movies on MC University. Our latest episode was Spider-Man 3. We had lots of feelings about that and how that movie is perceived. Our next episode is going to be Fantastic Four: Rise to the Silver Surfer with my co-host from Pip, Harv, is joining us for that conversation. So we'll have some Canada rep there. It's going to be great. But yeah, that's all the things I'm doing.
We're getting closer and closer to me yelling about Andrew Garfield on MC University. It's coming so soon. I cannot wait.
That'll be, I think, the 4th episode of season 2 or something.
Cannot wait. It's
so
coming.
Close.
Marissa, where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at MissAbleBissa. I don't know what's going to be happening over there, but it's going to be fun stuff, probably about things that you can watch on Disney Plus. And if you can't watch it on Disney Plus, it's probably on HBO Max. That's what I watch. That's what I talk about. And Wigs.
Alexis?
I'm Alexis Blake Reads Comics, and I haven't been talking about anything anywhere. But I still have 911 things to talk about, and I'm driving Sly and JJ crazy. So if you are a 911 person, find me anywhere on the internet, and we can talk about it.
We should plug your cryptic 911 tweets on Twitter. If you go through Alexis' tweets and you're wondering what they're about, they are often referencing things in 911 and 911 Lone Star.
And like my conversations with Sly, I do not start with any sort of episode description. So you just have to figure out where the tweet is supposed to have come from.
It's truly
the bane
very
of my existence.
It's very Taylor Swift of
what
you.
episode? What episode are you on? I'm like, you should just know. You should just live in my brain and know what it is. But yeah.
It's very Taylor Swift Easter egg of you. I respect it. I think it's great. We should also plug that coming up on the show, we are going to be doing series around shows, including Only Murders in the Building, which we will never shut up about how excited we are about Only Murders in the Building coming out in a few weeks. Miss Marvel starting very soon. What else are we talking about soon, team? Those are the two big ones I think we have coming up, but there's all kinds of things coming down the pipeline. Like we said, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Stranger Things just started. So, as we watch more casual viewing, I'm sure we'll be talking about it over the coming weeks. I have so much to say on Harry's House that I suppose I'll dig into next time with all of you. Lots to look forward to. So if you enjoyed tonight's conversation with JJ and Max, that we do this every single week about all the shows and content that we're watching and loving, and we hope that you come back. We do this show to try and make space where you can have nuanced conversation in a safe environment where you feel like you're with fellow fans, but without all the drama that some of the other platforms provide. So we hope that you come back and feel safe and welcome here, because we loved having you this week. And we'll see you next time on We'll Throw the After Party. Bye, everybody.